The ground shook beneath Ryan's boots as another explosion lit up the dark sky of Kepler Moon. 3 years of this war, and he still felt his heart jump every time the enemy dropped their plasma bombs. The mining facility around him was falling apart, metal beams twisted like broken bones, and smoke filled the air so thick he could barely see 10 feet ahead. Ryan pressed his back against a concrete wall and checked his rifle. His squad had been separated during the last attack, and now he was alone in enemy territory. The smart thing would be to find a safe spot and wait for backup. That's what his training said. That's what any soldier with half a brain would do. But Ryan had never been good at doing the smart thing. He heard something that made him freeze. Not the usual sounds of war, the explosions, the falling debris, the distant shouts of soldiers. This was different, quieter. It sounded like someone was trapped. Ryan moved carefully through the rubble, stepping over broken pipes and avoiding the sparking electrical wires hanging from the ceiling. The sound was getting clearer now. Someone was definitely trapped under a pile of metal and concrete, and they were still alive. He followed the sound around a corner and stopped dead in his tracks. There, pinned under a massive steel beam, was one of them, a Zephyrian, the enemy. Ryan's finger moved to his rifle trigger automatically. In 3 years of fighting, he'd learned that hesitation meant death. These alien beings were faster than humans, stronger than humans, and they could read minds. Every soldier knew the stories. You see one of them, you shoot first and ask questions later. But something made him pause. This Zephyrian wasn't trying to attack him. She wasn't even trying to call for help. She was just lying there, trapped and hurt, staring at him with these strange purple eyes that looked hopeless. Her skin had these glowing patterns that he'd seen on other Zephyrians, but hers were dim and covered in scars. She looked like she'd given up on everything. Ryan had seen that look before, in the mirror, after he lost his whole unit in the Battle of Proxima Station. It was the look of someone who'd stopped believing they deserved to live. The smart thing would be to walk away, or better yet, put her out of her misery and move on. She was the enemy. Her people had started this war. They killed millions of humans across the galaxy. But Ryan found himself putting down his rifle instead. He grabbed the steel beam and tried to lift it. The thing was massive, probably weighed more than a small car. But Ryan had grown up on the construction sites back on Earth Colony 7 before the war started. He knew about leverage and angles. He found a piece of pipe and used it as a lever, slowly lifting the beam inch by inch. The Zephyrian woman watched him with complete confusion. She said something in her own language, but Ryan didn't understand. All he could focus on was getting this beam off her legs before her injuries got worse. It took him nearly 20 minutes, but he finally managed to free her. Her legs were badly hurt, and she had cuts all over her arms and face. Ryan pulled out his medical kit, the same supplies he'd use on any human soldier, and started cleaning her wounds. That's when she spoke in perfect human language. "Why did you save me, human? I am worthless." Her voice was soft and filled with genuine surprise, like she truly couldn't understand what he'd done. Ryan looked up from bandaging her leg and met her eyes. They weren't the cold, calculating eyes he'd expected from an enemy soldier. They were just sad, confused, like she'd never experienced kindness from anyone, let alone someone who was supposed to be her enemy. Ryan didn't know what to say. Why had he saved her? Every part of his training screamed that this was wrong. Every story he'd heard about the war said these aliens were monsters, who deserved nothing but destruction. But looking at her now, hurt and abandoned in the ruins of this facility, she didn't look like a monster. She looked like someone who'd been forgotten by the world. "I don't know," Ryan finally answered, and it was the truth. The woman tried to sit up but winced in pain. Ryan helped her lean against a piece of concrete. That's when he noticed something else. Her clothes weren't like the military uniforms he'd seen on other Zephyrians. They were plain, worn out, like work clothes. And those scars on her glowing skin patterns, they looked old, like they'd been there long before this battle. "You are not like the other humans," she said quietly. "They would have left me to die. My own people would have left me to die. Your own people. She looked down at her scarred hands. I am Nullcast. We are less than nothing to our society. We have no mental powers, no value, no purpose except to work until we die. When the war started, they sent us to the front lines as workers. They told us to expect death. They said it would be the most useful thing we could ever do. Ryan felt something cold settle in his stomach. He'd always thought the enemy was united, that they all believed in their cause. But this woman talked about her own people the way humans talked about throwing away garbage. What's your name? He asked. Kira. She said, though names matter little for ones like me, I'm Ryan. She looked at him like he'd just told her something impossible. You give your name to worthless enemy. Before Ryan could answer, they heard voices in the distance, Zephyrian voices, getting closer. Kira's eyes went wide with fear, but not the kind of fear he'd expect from someone hearing her own people coming to rescue her. Hide. She whispered urgently, if they find you here with me, they will torture you before they kill you, and they will kill me too, for being saved by human. Ryan looked around the destroyed room. There was a small space behind some fallen equipment where he could hide, but it would mean leaving Kira alone and injured. I'm not leaving you, he said. Kira stared at him like he'd lost his mind. Why? I told you. I'm worthless. Save yourself. The voices were getting closer now. Ryan could hear their strange language echoing through the ruins. He made a decision that went against every bit of military training he'd ever received. He helped Kira to her feet and half carried her toward a hole in the wall. That led to what looked like old maintenance tunnels. They slipped through just as the voices reached the room they'd been in. In the darkness of the tunnel, pressed close together and trying not to make any sound, Ryan felt Kira trembling. Not from cold or pain, but from something deeper. She kept whispering the same thing over and over. Why did you save me? Why did you save me? Ryan didn't have an answer. All he knew was that leaving her there would have felt like abandoning a part of himself. Maybe it was because he recognized that hopeless look in her eyes. Maybe it was because he was tired of all the death and destruction. Or maybe it was because, for the first time in 3 years of war, he met someone who seemed as lost and alone as he felt. They stayed hidden in that tunnel for hours, listening to the search parties move through the ruins above them. And in that darkness, with an alien woman who called herself worthless, Ryan began to wonder if everything he'd been told about this war was wrong. The tunnel was cold and dark, and Ryan could hear water dripping somewhere in the distance. He and Kira had been hiding here for 2 days now, sharing his emergency food rations and trying to stay quiet whenever they heard footsteps above them. The search parties were still looking, but they seemed to be moving further away from their hiding spot. Ryan watched Kira as she carefully cleaned her wounds with water from a broken pipe. Her movements were precise and practiced, like she'd done this many times before. The glowing patterns on her skin were a little brighter now that she was healing, but they were still dim compared to what he'd seen on other Zephyrians during battle. You do this often? Ryan asked, nodding toward her bandages. Kira looked up, confused. Do what? Take care of yourself. You're good at it. She made a sound that might have been a laugh, but there was no humor in it. When you are Nullcast, no one else will care for your wounds. We learn early, or we die. Ryan felt that cold feeling in his stomach again every time Kira talked about her life. It sounded worse than anything he could imagine. Tell me about the Nullcast. I want to understand. Kira was quiet for a long time, staring at her hands. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. My people are born with gifts, mental powers. They can speak to each other with their minds, move objects without touching them, see into the future. These gifts decide everything about your life, where you live, what job you do, who you marry, even if you deserve to eat. She touched one of the scars on her arm. But some of us are born broken, no powers at all. We are called Nullcast because we are nothing, less than nothing. We exist only to do the work that those with powers consider beneath them. Ryan tried to imagine growing up in a world where your worth was decided the moment you were born. On Earth, he'd been poor, sure. His family lived in the overcrowded colonies where jobs were hard to find. But at least he'd had a chance to prove himself. At least people saw him as human. "How many of you are there?" he asked. "More than the high caste want to admit. Maybe one in every 100 births. They tried to hide us, keep us in separate areas. Some families abandon their null-caste children in the wilderness. Others work us until we die from exhaustion." Kira pulled her knees to her chest and looked smaller somehow. "When the war started, they decided we could finally be useful. They sent us to dangerous places like this mining facility. They told us we should be grateful for the chance to serve. That dying for our people would be the first worthy thing we ever did." Ryan felt anger building in his chest, not at Kira, but at the system that had treated her this way. "That's why you were here. They sent you to die. They sent hundreds of us. We were told to keep the machines running while the real soldiers fought. When your people attacked, most of the others ran deeper into the facility. I got trapped when that beam fell." She looked at him with those sad purple eyes. "I thought it was finally over. I thought I could rest." The way she said it made Ryan's heart ache. She hadn't been scared of dying. She'd been relieved. "I used to think about it a lot," Ryan admitted, "after my unit died. After I watched good people get torn apart by this war, sometimes I thought it would be easier to just stop fighting." Kira studied his face. "But you kept going. Why?" Ryan thought about it. He'd never really put it into words before. "I guess because giving up felt like betraying everyone who died, like their sacrifice. Wouldn't mean anything if I just quit." "But what if their sacrifice already meant nothing?" Kira asked quietly. "What if this whole war is just powerful people sending expendable people to die for reasons that don't matter?" The question hit Ryan harder than he expected. He'd been a soldier for 3 years, fighting because he was told it was the right thing to do, fighting to protect humanity from an alien threat. But sitting here with Kira, learning about how her own people treated her, he was starting to wonder who the real enemy was. "Maybe you're right," he said. "Maybe we're both just expendable people caught in someone else's war." They were quiet for a while, listening to the sounds of the facility above them. Then Kira asked something that surprised him. "What was your life like before the war? Before you became a soldier?" Ryan smiled, remembering. "I worked construction with my father on Colony 7. We built houses, schools, hospitals. It was good work, hard work, but we were creating things instead of destroying them. You build homes for people. Yeah, there's something satisfying about it, you know? Starting with empty ground and ending with a place where families can live and be safe." Kira's eyes lit up in a way he hadn't seen before. "I understand. Before they sent me here, I worked in the food production centers. I grew plants that fed people. It was not considered important work, but I liked knowing that what I did kept people alive." "That sounds important to me," Ryan said. Kira stared at him, like he'd said something incredible. No one has ever said that before. That's when they heard it. Voices in the tunnel system, but not the organized search parties from before. These voices sounded scared, desperate. They were speaking in Zephyrian, but quietly, like they were trying not to be found. Kira went very still, listening. Her face changed as she understood what they were saying. "What is it?" Ryan whispered. "Other nullcast." She said, her voice filled with disbelief. "They are hiding too. They say the high caste soldiers left them behind when they retreated. They say they are hunting us now, calling us deserters and cowards." Ryan felt his anger spike again. "They left their own people behind. We are not their people," Kira said bitterly. "We never were. They used us as long as we were useful, and now that the facility is lost, we are just loose ends to clean up." The voices were getting closer. Ryan could see light from their makeshift torches reflecting off the tunnel walls. He made a decision. "We should help them," he said. Kira looked at him in shock. "Help them, Ryan. They will be terrified of you. They have been taught that humans are monsters who torture prisoners. Then you'll have to convince them I'm not." "Why? Would you risk your life for more worthless aliens?" Ryan looked at her seriously. "Because they're not worthless, and neither are you. And maybe it's time someone showed them that." The voices were very close now. Kira took a deep breath and called out softly in her own language. The voices stopped immediately, probably paralyzed. With fear, Kira spoke again, longer this time, and Ryan heard his name mentioned. There was a long silence, then hesitant responses. After several minutes of back and forth conversation, Kira turned to him. There are 6 of them. They are hurt and hungry. They want to know if you really saved me, and if you really won't harm them. Ryan thought about all the military training that said this was insane. Then he thought about Kira's face when she'd asked why he saved her. He thought about how grateful she looked when he said her work growing food was important. Tell them they're safe with us, he said. Till then we're going to find a way out of here together. As the small group of frightened Zephyrians slowly approached their hiding spot, Ryan realized something had changed inside him. He wasn't thinking like a soldier anymore. He was thinking like someone who built homes instead of destroying them. Someone who wanted to create safety instead of spreading fear. And for the first time since the war started, that felt like the right thing to do. The group of 7 moved carefully through the underground tunnels, with Kira leading the way and Ryan bringing up the rear. The 6 other Nullcast Zephyrians had been terrified of him at first, but Kira had somehow convinced them he wasn't going to hurt them. Now they followed her like she was their guide to safety. Ryan watched how naturally Kira took charge. She knew exactly which tunnels were safe and which ones might collapse. She could tell just by touching the walls where the structure was weak and where it was solid. When they came to flooded sections, she found ways around them that Ryan never would have spotted. How do you know all this? Ryan asked quietly as they rested in a wider section of tunnel. Kira looked embarrassed. Nullcasts work in places like this our whole lives. Maintenance tunnels, underground systems, forgotten spaces. We learn to read the bones of buildings because our lives depend on it. One of the other survivors, an older male named Zeph, spoke up in broken human language. Kira best at this. She saved us 3 times already from bad tunnels. Ryan looked at the group around them. These people had been told their whole lives they were worthless. But watching them work together, he saw something completely different. They shared their small amounts of food without being asked. They helped the injured ones walk without complaining. They stayed quiet and careful to keep everyone safe. You know, Ryan said to Kira, back on Earth, we call someone with your skills a structural engineer. It's one of the most important jobs in construction. Kira shook her head. That is work for high-caste minds. I just know how to not die. In broken places, same thing, Ryan said firmly. Just because your people don't value it doesn't mean it's not valuable. They had been walking for hours when they heard something that made everyone freeze. Voices above them, speaking in the formal Zephyrian language that Kira had told him was used by the upper castes. Kira listened intently, her face growing pale. She whispered something to the others, and Ryan saw fear spread across their faces like wildfire. What are they saying? Ryan asked. Clean up patrol, Kira whispered. They are looking for escape failures and genetic waste. They have orders to eliminate any nullcast found alive in the facility. Ryan felt sick. They're hunting their own people? We are not their people, said Mora, a young female who had been limping on an injured leg. We never were. We are just mistakes they want to erase. The voices above were getting closer, and Ryan could hear the heavy footsteps of what sounded like a full military patrol. They were trapped in this section of tunnel with nowhere to run. That's when Kira did something that surprised everyone. She stood up and started giving quiet orders to the group in their own language. Within minutes, they had organized themselves into a plan that Ryan didn't understand but could see was clever. What's happening? He asked. I told them we fight, Kira said simply. Fight? Against trained soldiers with better weapons? Kira looked at him with something he'd never seen in her eyes before. Determination. Ryan, they will kill us anyway. At least this way, we choose how we die. But as Ryan watched the group prepare, he realized they weren't planning to die at all. They were planning to win. Zeph had found a way to weaken the tunnel ceiling above where the patrol would pass. Mora, despite her injured leg, was setting up a distraction using pieces of metal that would make noise in the opposite direction. 2 others were preparing to cut the power lines that ran through this section, plunging the area into darkness. You've done this before, Ryan said, amazed. Survive, Yes, Kira said. We have been surviving our whole lives while everyone else wished we would disappear. When the patrol entered the tunnel system, everything happened fast. The lights went out first. Then the ceiling collapse blocked their escape route. Then, the noise distraction sent half of them running in the wrong direction. In the chaos and darkness, the Nullcast group moved like they could see in the dark. Disarming confused soldiers and taking their weapons, Ryan found himself fighting alongside them, but he quickly realized they didn't need his help. These people who had been called worthless and weak were out fighting trained military personnel, using nothing but intelligence, teamwork, and desperation. When it was over, the patrol was unconscious and tied up, and the refugee group had new weapons, supplies, and most importantly, proof that they could protect themselves. Where did you learn to do that? Ryan asked Kira as they moved deeper into the tunnel system. We did not learn, she said. We just did what we had to do. But Ryan could see it was more than that, under pressure. Kira had become a natural leader. She saw the whole situation, like a puzzle, understanding how each person's skills could fit together to solve their problem. She thought 3 steps ahead, anticipated what the enemy would do, and found weaknesses that trained soldiers had missed as they walked the other. Survivors began to look at Kira differently too. They started asking her opinion about which direction to go, how to stay safe, what to do next. And Kira, who had spent her whole life being told she was nothing, slowly began to accept that maybe she was something after all. There's a place, Zeph said as they rested again. Neutral zone. Both armies leave it alone. Maybe we can reach it. How far? Ryan asked. 3 days through the tunnels. But dangerous. Many patrols, both human and Zephyrian. Ryan looked around at the group. They were tired, hurt, and low on supplies. But they were also something he hadn't expected to find in the middle of a war zone. They were. Hope we go together, Kira said. And everyone nodded as they prepared to continue their journey. Ryan realized something had changed in how he thought about the war. These people weren't his enemies. They were just people trying to survive in a world that had decided they didn't matter. And if that was true about them, maybe it was true about a lot of other people on both sides of this conflict. Maybe the real enemy wasn't the other species. Maybe the real enemy was anyone who decided that some people were worth less than others. Looking at Kira as she carefully planned their route to safety, Ryan knew he'd found something worth fighting for. Not a country or a planet or an idea, but actual people who deserved the chance to live and be valued for who they really were. The journey to the neutral zone would be dangerous, but for the first time since the war started, Ryan felt like he was fighting for the right side. The neutral zone wasn't what Ryan had expected. Instead of some fancy diplomatic building, it was an old space station that looked like it had been abandoned for years. Half the lights didn't work, the air recycling system made weird noises, and everything smelled like rust and old metal. But it was safe. That's what mattered. Over the past 2 weeks, their small group of 7 had grown into something much bigger. Word had spread through the underground networks that there was a place where Nullcast Zephyrians could find shelter, where humans who were tired of fighting could rest without being called deserters, where anyone who didn't fit into the neat categories of war could just exist. Ryan watched Kira as she organized the daily schedules for the growing community. She had transformed completely from the broken woman he'd found under that fallen beam. Now she moved with purpose, making decisions that kept dozens of people fed, safe, and working together. The water recycling system needs repairs again, she told him, looking up from her makeshift desk made of salvaged metal. And we're running low on medical supplies. I can fix the water system, Ryan said. Learned enough about plumbing and construction. But the medical supplies, I know. Kira's face was worried. 3 more injured people arrived yesterday. Burns from a chemical explosion at the Kepler-7 mining station. If we don't get proper medicine soon, she didn't need to finish. They both knew people would die. The space station now housed 43 refugees. Nullcast Zephyrians made up most of them, but there were also human soldiers who'd walked away from battles they couldn't believe in anymore. A few had families, people who'd been caught in the middle when their planets became battlegrounds. Ryan had never imagined he'd be running what was basically a refugee camp. But watching how naturally Kira had stepped into leadership, he found himself becoming her second in command. Together, they'd figured out work schedules, food distribution, and how to keep people hopeful when everything outside their walls was falling apart. Ryan called out Tom, a former human medic who joined them last week. "We've got a problem, Ryan." And Kira followed Tom to the communication room, where their salvaged radio equipment was picking up military transmissions. The voices were clear enough to understand, and what they heard made Ryan's blood run cold. Suspected location of the deserter camp has been confirmed. Joint Task Force will move to eliminate the threat within 72 hours. Joint Task Force? Kira asked quietly. Tom nodded grimly. Both sides, human and Zephyrian military, working together for the first time in this war. Apparently, they've decided that soldiers who refuse to fight and nullcast who won't die quietly are more dangerous than each other. Ryan felt the familiar weight of impossible choices settling on his shoulders. They could run, scatter everyone to the winds, and hope some survived. They could surrender and face whatever punishment both militaries had planned, or they could fight. "How long do we have?" Kira asked. 3 days, maybe less if they decide to move faster. That evening, Kira called everyone together in the station's main cargo bay. Ryan stood beside her as she addressed the crowd, speaking in both languages so everyone could understand. "We have a choice to make," she said. Her voice steadied despite the fear Ryan could see in her eyes. "Both armies are coming for us. They see what we've built here as a threat to their war." Murmurs spread through the crowd. Some people looked scared, others angry, a few just tired. "We can scatter," Kira continued. "Go back to hiding in whatever dark corners will take us, or we can stand and fight for what we've created here." An older human woman named Beth raised her hand. "Fight with what? Most of us aren't soldiers. We're just people trying to survive." "That's exactly why we can win," Kira said. And Ryan heard the confidence in her voice that had grown over these past weeks. "They expect us to run because they think we're worthless. They think we're weak because we choose cooperation over conquest." She gestured around the cargo bay, at the makeshift homes people had built, the workshop where they repaired equipment, the small garden where they grew food. "Look what we've accomplished in 2 weeks. Look how we've taken care of each other. We've proven that people don't need to destroy each other to survive. We've proven that worth isn't decided by the powerful. It's created by what we do for each other." Ryan watched faces in the crowd change as Kira spoke. The fear was still there, but it was mixing with something else: pride, determination, the realization that they built something worth defending. "I won't lie to you," Kira said. "If we fight, some of us will die. If we run, some of us will die anyway, alone and forgotten. But if we stand together, if we show both armies that their war can't destroy what we've created, maybe we can build something that lasts beyond this conflict." The vote wasn't even close. 38 people chose to stay and fight. Only 5 decided to leave. And the community wished them well and gave them supplies for their journey. Over the next 2 days, Ryan watched their peaceful refugee camp transform into something he'd never seen before. It wasn't a military base. They had no interest in conquering territory or defeating enemies. Instead, it became a fortress built around protecting each other. Kira organized defensive positions using her knowledge of structural engineering. Tom set up a medical station that could handle casualties. The Nullcast used their experience with hidden spaces to create escape routes and supply caches. The human soldiers shared tactical knowledge, while the Zephyrian refugees contributed their understanding of their people's military strategies. But the most important thing they built wasn't physical. They built trust. Ryan saw it in how easily humans and Zephyrians worked side by side, how naturally people shared resources and responsibilities, how decisions were made not by rank or species, but by listening to whoever had the best ideas. On the night before the attack was expected, Ryan found Kira standing alone in the observation deck, looking out at the stars, having second thoughts. He asked. She shook her head. "No, for the first time in my life. I know exactly what I'm fighting for. She turned to look at him. You saved me from under that beam, Ryan. But this place, these people, this is what saved my soul. Mine too, Ryan admitted. I spent 3 years fighting for ideas I didn't really understand. Now I'm fighting for people I care about. It feels completely different. Whatever happens tomorrow, Kira said, we've already won something important. We've proven that the war was wrong about us, all of us. As they stood together watching the distant lights of military ships approaching their station, Ryan realized she was right, win or lose. They created something that neither army had managed in 3 years of fighting. They created a place where worth wasn't determined by power or species or caste, but by the simple act of choosing to care for each other. Tomorrow would test whether that was strong enough to survive the storm that was coming. The attack came at dawn, just as Kira had predicted. Ryan watched through the observation windows as both human and Zephyrian ships surrounded their station. For the first time in 3 years of war, the two militaries were working together. All it had taken was a group of refugees who refused to hate each other. Incoming transmission. Tom called from the communication station. A voice crackled through the speakers, speaking in formal military language. Attention illegal occupants of Station Gamma 7. You have 1 hour to surrender unconditionally. Any resistance will be met with complete destruction. Kira looked around at the faces of their community. 43 people who had found hope. In the darkest corner of the galaxy, men, women, and children who had been told they were worthless, but had proven that worth wasn't something others could decide for you. Open a channel, Kira said calmly. Tom looked surprised but did as she asked. Kira stepped forward to the microphone, and when she spoke, her voice carried to both fleets. This is Kira of the Nullcast, speaking for the free people of this station. We are not illegal occupants. We are refugees seeking safety from a war that has forgotten why it started. There was a long pause before a different voice responded, colder, more hostile. You are deserters and genetic failures harboring enemy combatants. Surrender now or face the consequences. Ryan saw something flash in Kira's eyes. Not anger, but something deeper. Understanding. You call us failures, she said into the microphone. But in 2 weeks, we've accomplished what your war couldn't. In 3 years, we've proven that humans and Zephyrians can live together in peace. We've created something worth protecting without destroying anyone else to do it. She paused, looking around at their community one more time. If that makes us failures in your eyes, then we choose to fail together. The transmission cut off, and Ryan knew their hour of grace had just ended early. The first wave of attacks came from the human ships. Energy blasts that rocked the station and sent everyone scrambling to their positions. But this wasn't like any battle Ryan had fought before. Instead of trying to destroy their attackers, they focused entirely on protecting each other. The Nullcast had prepared escape routes through the station's maintenance systems. When sections became too dangerous, they evacuated people quickly and efficiently. The human refugees used their military training not to attack, but to create defensive barriers that bought time for the wounded to reach safety. Ryan found himself working alongside Zeph to repair critical systems while energy blasts shook the walls around them. This is crazy, Zeph said in his broken human language. We cannot win against the fleets. We're not trying to win, Ryan said, realizing the truth as he spoke it. We're trying to survive and show them that we're worth more alive than dead. That's when Kira did something that changed everything. Instead of hiding in the command center, she went to the communication array and began broadcasting on every frequency she could find, not just to the attacking fleets, but to anyone who might be listening across the galaxy. My name is Kira. Her voice carried through space, reaching ships and planets and communication stations across multiple star systems. I was told I was worthless because I was born without the powers my people value. The human beside me was told he was expendable because he came from a poor colony world. Ryan could hear explosions getting closer, but Kira's voice remained steady. But we discovered something your war doesn't want you to know. Worth isn't something others give you. It's something you create by how you treat the people around you. We've built a community here where no one is worthless, where no one is expendable, where the only thing that matters is how we take care of each other. On the tactical displays, Ryan could see something strange happening. Some of the attacking ships had stopped firing. Their weapons were powering down. If you're listening to this and you're tired of fighting for causes that don't make sense anymore, if you're tired of being told that some people matter more than others, if you want to be part of something that builds instead of destroys, then you're welcome here. More ships stopped attacking. Ryan could hear confused chatter on the military frequencies as commanders tried to understand why their forces were hesitating. Because here's what we've learned, Kira continued, her voice now reaching across the galaxy. The war isn't between humans and Zephyrians. It's between people who believe some lives have value and people who believe all lives have value. It's between those who think worth comes from power and those who know worth comes from compassion. That's when the impossible happened. One of the human military ships turned its weapons away from the station and toward the command vessel that had been coordinating the attack. A Zephyrian fighter broke formation and moved to defend the station instead of attacking it. What's happening? Tom asked in amazement. Ryan watched the tactical display as more and more ships stopped following orders. Some started heading back to their home bases. Others requested permission to dock with the station. The coordinated attack was falling apart as individual soldiers and pilots decided they'd rather join the community than destroy it. The fighting continued for another hour, but it wasn't the same kind of battle anymore. Now it was the people who believed in the war fighting against the people who had stopped believing in it, and slowly, inevitably, the believers found themselves outnumbered. When the last hostile ship finally retreated, the space around Station Gamma 7 was filled with vessels from both sides, their crews asking for permission to come aboard and see this place. That had convinced people to stop fighting. 3 months later, Ryan stood in the same observation deck, where he and Kira had talked before the battle, but everything was different. Now, the station had been expanded with help from the ships that had joined them. What started as a refuge for 43 people had grown into a city in space, home to thousands of humans and Zephyrians who had chosen cooperation over conflict. Kira found him there, as he'd known she would. She looked tired but happy, carrying a data pad full of reports about new arrivals, resource allocation, and the 100 other details involved in running a community that had accidentally become a symbol of hope. Any regrets? Ryan asked. Kira smiled, looking out at the ships coming and going, bringing families and supplies and stories from across the galaxy. About leaving my old life behind? Never. About proving that worthless people could change the galaxy? She laughed. Maybe that's the best kind of failure there is. A young human child ran past the observation deck, chasing a Zephyrian child in some game they'd invented together. Neither of them cared about the species difference that had started a war. They just cared about playing together. So what happens now? Ryan asked. Kira looked thoughtful. Now we keep growing, keep showing people that there's another way to live, keep proving that worth isn't something powerful people decide for us. She pointed to a section of the station where construction was ongoing. We're building schools there, places where human and Zephyrian children can learn together. Where being different isn't something to fight about, but something to celebrate. Ryan nodded, thinking about how far they'd all come from that moment when he pulled Kira from under a fallen beam. You know what I think. What? I think you were never worthless. You just lived in a world that was too blind to see your value. Kira was quiet for a moment, then smiled. Maybe that's true for all of us. Maybe the whole war happened because too many people forgot that everyone has worth, regardless of where they come from, or what powers they have, or what mistakes they've made. As they watched another ship dock with refugees seeking a new kind of life, Ryan realized that the question Kira had asked him in that bombed-out facility had been answered. Why did he save her? Because saving each other is what gives life meaning. Because everyone deserves the chance to discover their own worth. Because sometimes the most important thing you can do is refuse to let someone believe they're worthless, and maybe, just maybe, that's how you change the galaxy. One person at a time.